You know what's weird, y'all? It wasn't until the year 2001 that all 50 states officially observed MLK Day as a federal holiday. Or was it? In most years, there are 11 federal holidays mandated by law that we must observe. However, every 4 years, there happens to be 12 federal holidays. That 12th federal holiday is Inauguration Day, which in 2025 will occur January 20th. The other 11 federal holidays that we observe on a consistent basis starts January 1st with, of course, New Year's Day. Following New Year's, we have Martin Luther King's birthday, which is typically celebrated the third Monday in every January. Next comes February 17th, which is Washington's birthday, and that holiday is oftentimes called President's Day in many of the states. Then we have May 26th, which is Memorial Day, and most recently we have Juneteenth, which is celebrated on June 19th. July 4th is, of course, Independence Day, followed by September 1st, which is Labor Day. Then we move to October 13th, which happens to be Columbus Day. Finally, we round out the year with November 11th being Veterans Day. Of course, Thanksgiving is November 27th. And finally, we have Christmas, December 25th. Those are all of your federal holidays. Today, though, we will be focusing on the observance of Martin Luther King's birthday, better known as MLK Day. Now, of course, we all know who the good Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is. He was the Baptist minister, one of the most prominent figures in the history of the world when it comes to civil rights movements. During the 1950s and 60s, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, of course, the prominent civil rights leader here in the United States of America, where he famously led the March on Washington way back in 1963, where, of course, he delivered one of his most famous speeches that stands the test of time in regards to audio recordings and, of course, famous speeches, and that is the I Have a Dream speech. However, as we all know, though, he was assassinated tragically in 1968, as in those days, it seemed that if you went against the establishment, you were openly assassinated. Now, Dr. King had a very interesting life filled with hard work, dedication, and accomplishment. He was able to accomplish so much and do so many different things that I'm not even going to sit here and try to pretend that I can adequately explain the importance of this man or the greatness that he did indeed achieve. I will say, though, that he was able to accomplish so much in just 39 years and have such a profound effect on so many people's lives across the country that we do now have, of course, the federal holiday of MLK Day, which celebrates his birthday of January 15th. And this federal holiday has a very unique distinction, as this is the only holiday designated by Congress as a national day of service. So when observing this holiday, the expectation is that one gets out into their community and volunteers, gives back to their community, does something positive for their community, does something beneficial and positive for their neighbors, their friends, their families, and does something beneficial and positive for even the strangers that we pass by on a daily basis. That is the National Day of Service that Martin Luther King's birthday is. However, and sadly, this federal holiday, MLK Day, has a bit of a controversial history, and we only need but look back a few years to find such controversies. And again, for reference, Martin Luther King's birthday is January 15th, and he was assassinated in 1968. Following Dr. King's assassination in 1968, it was first proposed in 1979 that we make Martin Luther King's birthday a federally observed holiday. But unfortunately, it did not quite pass into law. And it was not until 1983 that we actually saw the fruition of making Martin Luther King's birthday a federally recognized holiday. And this was done so by the president at the time, Ronald Reagan. But even then, it wasn't officially recognized until January 20th of 1986, 3 years after it was officially signed into law. But remember, it wasn't until the year 2001 that allegedly all 50 states officially observed Martin Luther King's birthday as an official holiday. But how can this be, you ask? It's a federal holiday. It's a law. It must be observed, right? Well, you see, not exactly. The federal government cannot enforce any state to observe any holiday. Let's take Texas, for example. As previously mentioned, Columbus Day is a federally observed holiday. However, in the state of Texas, they have not observed Columbus Day as an official holiday since 1991. As a matter of fact, depending on which source you reference, only about 16 states or so currently observe Columbus Day as an actual holiday. Now, going back to MLK Day, it is indeed a federal holiday signed into law in 1983. But again, not every state has to observe this. Currently, though, in the year 2024, every state does observe MLK Day as an official holiday. However, just a few years ago, that was not the case. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these states that fought to keep it from being a recognized holiday. We are going to start our journey in the state whose motto is Ditat Deus, which is Latin for God and riches. And of course, I'm referring to the Grand Canyon state, better known as Arizona. Now, Arizona is very interesting and was actually my favorite state to research because the reason why Arizona finally made MLK Day an official holiday is closely tied and related to the NFL. Now, remember, Martin Luther King Day was signed into law by Ronald Reagan in 1983 and first officially observed in 1986. And at that time, the governor of Arizona, a one Bruce Babbitt, did indeed declare that Martin Luther King's birthday is an official holiday in Arizona. However, the state legislature failed to ever pass a bill that would make MLK Day an official holiday in Arizona. So the governor here jumped the gun a bit by declaring it a holiday without ever being able to do so legally. So the very next year, a new governor takes over, a Mr. Evan Meacham, and he immediately explains that, hey, this bill was never passed, so a law was never signed. Ipso facto, MLK Day is not an official holiday in Arizona. And he argues that in the state of Arizona, they can't afford to pay all of their state employees for a day off. And additionally, they reserve officially paid days off for former presidents of the United States of America and not civil rights activists. Fast forward a few years to 1990, and the bill is brought up again to make MLK Day an official holiday in Arizona. But per usual, the bill fails to receive enough votes to pass. Unfortunately, though, for Arizona, this time around, there were some severe consequences for failing to pass the bill and make MLK Day an official holiday. Now, the previous failures of 1986 and 1987 to make MLK Day an official holiday in Arizona did result in some boycotts and resulted in some bad publicity for the state of Arizona. But as they say, 3 strikes and you're out, as this time in 1990, the NFL took note of the state's failure to make MLK Day an official holiday. You see, earlier that year, the NFL had graciously awarded Arizona the opportunity to host an upcoming Super Bowl in 1993. That, of course, being Super Bowl number 27, where the Dallas Cowboys absolutely waxed the Buffalo Bills 52-17, signaling the beginning of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys dynasty. But unfortunately for Arizona, the NFL looked at them and said, you know what? Y'all are making yourselves look real bad here, and we don't want y'all to make us look bad, so we're out of here. You can't have the Super Bowl in 1993, and they subsequently moved it to the Rose Bowl in California for that year. Now, after taking Super Bowl number 27 away from Arizona, that was scheduled to be again held in 1993, the NFL said, all right, we'll give you another chance. We'll let you host Super Bowl number 30, which will take place in 1996. But they put in one stipulation. They told Arizona, hey, if you want this Super Bowl to happen in your state, you got to do one thing. And that one thing, of course, was to sign into law that MLK Day is an officially observed holiday for the state. So guess what happened? In November of 1992, the bill came up once again to make MLK Day an official holiday in Arizona. And guess what? This time it passed, officially marking 1993 as the first official observance of MLK Day in Arizona. And of course, the NFL made good on its promise by awarding Super Bowl 30 in 1996 to Arizona, which of course is the Super Bowl where the Dallas Cowboys absolutely murked the Pittsburgh Steelers 27-17, solidifying their title as America's team. All right, so that is the story of the first official observance in the state of Arizona of MLK Day. So let's move on over to what some call the Switzerland of America, the Granite State. That, of course, is New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire, or is it New Hampshire? I don't know. You tell me. Is it New Hampshire or New Hampshire? Regardless, in New Hampshire, it was originally brought up in 1985 to make MLK Day an official holiday in the state. However, of course, it failed, and it failed absolutely miserably. You see, at the time, New Hampshire's population was roughly only 1% African American. So it was argued that making MLK Day an official holiday in the state wasn't a pressing issue, as it would only mean something to 1% of the population. So every subsequent year, there was a campaign pushing to make MLK Day an official holiday in the state. However, year after year after year, it failed to pass. It wasn't until 1993 that the state of New Hampshire finally passed into law, no, not MLK Day, but instead they passed into law Civil Rights Day, as it was argued that the civil rights movement is greater than one man, and one man should not be celebrated for that accomplishment. And of course, this caused a great deal of controversy in New Hampshire. Yes, they had a Civil Rights Day, but that wasn't good enough. The new campaign became, please change Civil Rights Day to the appropriately named MLK Day. And it wasn't until 1999 when Governor Jean Shaheen made it a point of hers to bring about this change. And finally, in June of 1999, the bill was passed, and passed just barely, might I add. But it did pass, and of course it was signed into law by the governor, marking the year 2000 as the first official observance of MLK Day in New Hampshire. So there you have it, New Hampshire's fight against MLK Day. Now let's move on to one of the first 13 colonies whose official beverage happens to be milk, and their official dance happens to be the good old square dance. Yes, that's right, I'm talking about Virginia. Interestingly enough, Virginia has celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday since 1978, 5 years before it was even signed into law to make it an official holiday. However, though, there is a caveat to that. His birthday was not celebrated independently. It was celebrated in conjunction with New Year's Day on January 1st for some reason. Now, there are some important birthdays to remember here in regards to Virginia and MLK Day. As you see, there are two very well-known sons of Virginia that have birthdays very close to Martin Luther King's. Remember, Martin Luther King's birthday is January 15th. Additionally, a very famous general by the name of Robert E. Lee was born on January 19th in Virginia. Also, we have the general by the name of Stonewall Jackson that was born on January 21st in, at the time, was Virginia, but has now become West Virginia. And for those of us who don't know or may have forgotten, Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson were both very famous generals for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Virginia, of course, being very proud of its Southern and Confederacy roots, have celebrated Robert E. Lee's birthday since all the way back in 1889. Additionally, in 1904, they began celebrating Thomas Stonewall Jackson's birthday in conjunction with Robert E. Lee's, having the first official Lee Jackson holiday in 1904. Fast forward all the way to 1983 when the federal government first announces that MLK Day will be an official holiday within the country, and Virginia actually is one of the very first states to adopt this as a holiday, if you will. But of course, like so many other states, Virginia refuses to observe Martin Luther King's birthday on its own. So Virginia, hysterically and sadly, decides to observe Martin Luther King Day, January 15th, in combination with Lee Jackson Day, thus creating in 1984 the very first Lee Jackson King Day in Virginia. Now, obviously, I don't need to point out the odd combination of two Confederate generals and a man who fought for civil rights and the equality of African Americans in this country. But somehow, Virginia got away with explaining Lee Jackson King Day as it is a celebration of the defenders of causes, as they so put it. Somehow equating the fighting the two generals did for the Confederacy during the Civil War was of equal importance to the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, fast forward from 1984 all the way to the year 2000, and here we are again, with some people finally realizing, you know what? Hey, maybe we shouldn't celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday on the same day that we celebrate two Confederate generals' birthday. So in 2000, the bill came up again, and it was finally passed, marking the year 2001 as the very first year Virginia celebrated MLK Day as its very own separate observed holiday. Now, Lee Jackson Day did continue on in Virginia and was curiously celebrated the Friday before Martin Luther King Day, even though the two generals' birthdays fall after Martin Luther King's. As a side note, though, just 4 years ago, in February of 2020, Virginia did finally do away with the official Lee Jackson Day. All right. We got 2 states left to go. Let's go ahead and move on to our very next state, whose motto is curiously only one word: industry. Also known as the Beehive State, better known as Utah. So Utah decided to bring up in 1986 whether or not MLK Day should be an officially observed holiday in the state. And Utah's first black senator, Terry Williams, introduced the bill to replace Abraham Lincoln's birthday, which is not a federal holiday, with Martin Luther King's birthday. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go as planned, as the bill introduced by Terry Williams was changed from MLK Day to Human Rights Day. And sadly, the vote to pass Human Rights Day instead of MLK Day happened with Dr. King's widow in attendance, Coretta Scott King. Fast forward again to the year 2000, and Utah Senator Pete Suazo introduces the bill to change the name from Human Rights Day to MLK Day. It passes and the governor signs into law in March of 2000 that MLK Day is an officially observed holiday in Utah, marking 2001 as the first year Utah observed MLK Day. But of course, we have to add on an additional sad side note regarding Utah and MLK Day. In 2010, Senator Mark Madsen from Eagle Mountain, Utah, decided to draft a bill that would honor gunmaker John Browning by giving him a state holiday on the same day as Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Now, could you imagine celebrating MLK Day, a man who was tragically assassinated, sharing a holiday with a man famous for designing and creating guns? Luckily, this bill did not pass. However, Utah did end up having a one-time John Browning Day on January 24th, 2011. Now let's go ahead and wrap this up with our final state, the state made for vacation, the state of smiling faces and beautiful places, the Palmetto State, South Carolina. South Carolina happens to be one of 10 states who still currently officially celebrate a Confederate holiday. For reference, those other states are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. That holiday for South Carolina is Confederate Memorial Day, celebrated annually on May 10th. And additionally, they have the dubious distinction of allegedly being the last state in the country to observe independently MLK Day, signed into law May 2nd of 2000. 2 months later than our last two states of Virginia and Utah. But of course, South Carolina had to go out swinging, as on that same bill that made MLK Day its own official holiday, they also signed into law the observance of their Confederate holiday, the Confederate Memorial Day. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That wraps up our adventure through the last few states who were slow to adopt MLK Day as an official holiday. Or does it? You may have noticed that throughout this video, I've said the word allegedly a couple of times now. And that's because during my research for this topic, which I found immensely interesting, all of these states that I've mentioned all have videos, blogs, articles written by local media that claim to be the last state in the country to observe MLK Day officially. Arizona probably being the most famous simply because it was tied to the NFL. But again, it was in 1993 that they passed into law the observance of an MLK Day. These other states, however, it wasn't until the year 2000 or the year 2001 that they begin officially observing MLK Day as its own holiday. So why do I keep saying allegedly here? Well, again, during my research for this topic, I found even more information that is pertinent and relevant to MLK Day and the state's observances of it. I have to also mention Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. All four of these states have celebrated what they call Lee King Day, which is very similar to the holiday celebrated in Virginia, which was Lee Jackson King Day. But of course, in 2000, again, Virginia did away with Lee Jackson King Day and began officially observing MLK Day on its own. But somehow, Tennessee made it all the way until the year 2017 with a combined King Lee Day. Additionally, Arkansas somehow made it all the way to the year 2018 with their combined celebrated holiday of King Lee Day. Now, the reason I didn't go farther in depth with Tennessee and Arkansas or Alabama and Mississippi is that there just isn't as much information out there regarding their combined celebration of Dr. King and Robert E. Lee's birthday. And it is noted in multiple articles and multiple sources that indeed, in the year 2000, all 50 states officially observed MLK Day as its own holiday. So I'm not sure why Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama get a pass here. But even stranger, to this day, in both Mississippi and Alabama, they still celebrate a combined Lee King Day. Now, I tried my best to figure out why they are not included or how they are not acknowledged as the last couple of states, but I just could not decipher that. So if you are aware as to why in South Carolina in May of 2000 is given the distinction of being the last state, I would love to hear about it. Obviously, in this case, we still need more discourse around the observance of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday as an official holiday, because even in the year 2024, we still have 2 states who refuse to give Dr. Martin Luther King his own independent holiday. Please let me know what you think about the man, the holiday, and the states that are not so keen on acknowledging the holiday.